The jungle was alive, but not in the way that made things feel safe. It was too quiet. Not silent, there were sounds, but every sound felt wrong. The tall purple trees stretched into the sky like jagged spires, their bark rough like stone and their roots tangled beneath thick layers of fog. Plants lined the path ahead, some pulsing faintly with light, others opening and closing their leaves like breathing lungs. There were no birds. No insects. Nothing that sang or buzzed. Only the low hiss of the wind and the soft squelch of moss beneath his boots. Riven walked slowly, careful not to make too much noise. His uniform was torn at the elbow, and a dark smear of dried blood streaked one cheek. 3 hours ago, he had lost contact with his team. Something had scrambled their comms. The last voice he'd heard was a garbled warning, followed by static and a burst of panicked breathing. Then nothing. He held his sidearm low but ready, his other hand gripping the small scanning device strapped to his wrist. It blinked, searching, then blinked again. Still no signal. Only trees. Vines. Silence, he muttered. Then, a sound. A cry. It echoed strangely, like it came from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't human. But it was definitely the voice of a child. Riven froze. He listened again. There it was. Thin, shaky. A scared whimper echoing through the mist. He turned his body slowly. "Hello?" he called. His voice was soft, but it still felt too loud in the strange hush of the forest. No answer. Another cry came, closer this time. Frantic. Almost broken. Riven hesitated only a second. Then he moved, careful and quick. Step by step, he followed the sound. He ducked beneath low-hanging vines that glistened with dew and avoided the curling fronds of a plant that hissed when he passed too close. He had heard stories about this jungle. Stories about creatures that looked like trees until they moved. Stories about plants that screamed. About traps left behind by ancient species long extinct. The stories didn't matter now. There was a child. He pushed through a thick curtain of hanging moss and stumbled into a clearing. There, at the center, half buried in dirt and leaves, sat a metal cage. It was old, rusted, scorched in places, and covered in strange, glowing glyphs. A jagged crack split one corner, and several of the bars had melted at the tips like someone had tried to burn their way out. Inside the cage, huddled at the back with her knees pulled to her chest, was a little girl. Her skin was pale blue, and her long, tattered hair hung over her face in uneven strands. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7. Her thin arms trembled where they wrapped around her legs. Her eyes, wide and glowing faint purple in the dim light, met his. She froze. So did Riven. A long moment passed in silence. Then she blinked, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. "It's okay," Riven said softly, raising both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't respond. She just stared. Her eyes were huge and filled with something beyond fear, something like loss. He knelt slowly, trying to make himself smaller. "My name's Riven. I'm human. From the rescue fleet." Still no response. Just that same deep, silent stare. "You're not alone anymore," he said, more gently. She watched him with the stillness of someone who expected everything to vanish again. Riven turned to the cage. The door was bent, and the lock was fused shut, but he could see where the structure had weakened. He reached for the tool at his belt and began working. Every time a piece of metal creaked or popped, the girl flinched. He winced with guilt but kept going, faster now. Minutes passed. At last, the door gave way with a groan. Riven stepped back. "You're free now," he said. She didn't run. She moved slowly, unsteadily, like her legs had forgotten how to hold her weight. She stepped forward, trembling. Just as she reached the threshold of the cage, a sharp hiss erupted behind them. Riven spun around, sidearm raised. Something slithered across the jungle floor, a thick vine, alive and moving, its tip shaped like a barbed claw. The girl gasped. Riven moved on instinct. He scooped her up and rolled to the side just as the vine struck, cracking the dirt where she had been. Another vine lashed out. He fired twice. The shots burned through the plant's surface. It screeched and recoiled into the ground. He looked down. "You okay?" She didn't answer. But she didn't pull away either. Her tiny hands clutched the front of his jacket. "We're getting out of here," he whispered. He held her close as he ran, weaving through trees, jumping roots, ducking low branches. The jungle groaned around them, resisting every step. It didn't want her to leave. But Riven wasn't leaving without her. Not now. They reached a small rise in the terrain where a broken satellite post lay half buried in moss. Riven laid her gently on a flat rock and knelt beside her. She looked at him with those huge purple eyes. "Why?" she whispered. He blinked. "Why what? Why you help me?" His throat tightened. "Because someone had to," he said. She looked down. Her voice shook. "No one else did. They ran." He hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Then I guess, someone has to be the first not to run." Her eyes shimmered. Very slowly, she reached out and took his hand. They stayed like that for a long while. The forest around them fell quiet again. Too quiet. Later, Riven sat with his back against the old satellite post, weapon across his lap. The girl sat next to him, knees to chest, still gripping his hand. She hadn't said another word. She hadn't let go. He looked around. This part of the jungle felt older. The trees were blackened in places. Some looked burned. The plants were slower, quieter. He tried the scanner again. Still nothing. He looked at her. "Do you have a name?" She didn't respond. He smiled gently. "Mine's Riven. You can just call me that." She looked at him for a moment. Just a flick of the eyes. But it was something. He reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. "Hungry?" She didn't move at first. Then slowly, carefully, she nodded. He unwrapped it and handed it to her. She sniffed it. Licked once. Then ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. Crumbs stuck to her lips. She didn't care. Riven watched her. Every bite brought more color to her cheeks. But the sadness in her eyes never left. He glanced at the faint, glowing lines on her skin. Not tattoos. Not paint. Something natural. He had never seen a species like hers before. "What's your home like?" he asked softly. She looked down. Shook her head. Gone. The sun was fading. Night would come soon. And with it, worse things. He stood up and offered her his hand. "We need to find shelter." She hesitated. Then she reached out. And once again, held his hand. They walked through thick brush, past towering stone roots and ancient broken statues overgrown with moss. The jungle darkened around them. The air grew heavy. Twice, they heard slithering. Twice, they froze. Twice, nothing came. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But she never let go. At last, they found a structure. Half a dome, buried in dirt and vines. Its surface was cracked but solid. Riven scanned it. No heat signatures. No movement. Safe. He helped her sit near a wall and pulled a heating pad from his bag. Warm light filled the chamber. He handed her a blanket. She pulled it around herself, sitting still. Just before he turned away, she whispered something. Lyra. He looked at her. Your name? She nodded. He smiled. That's beautiful. She didn't smile. Not quite. But the way her fingers curled around his hand again, the way she leaned into his side beneath the blanket. It was a start. Maybe, Riven thought, just maybe, she wouldn't have to be alone anymore. And neither would he. The morning came too fast. A thin gray light filtered through the cracks in the dome's broken ceiling. The forest outside was still. Not calm. Still in that way that suggested something was watching. Riven woke before Lyra. He didn't move at first, just listened. Birds hadn't returned. Wind hadn't stirred. The jungle remained a breath held in silence. He glanced down and saw her curled up next to him, the blanket wrapped tightly around her, small hands clutched at the edge like she thought it might vanish. Her breathing was soft, even. For the first time, it wasn't broken by little whimpers in her sleep. He let her rest. He watched the jungle. Something about it felt wrong. Like they'd crossed a line the night before, and now the forest knew they were there. Knew she was alive. Eventually, Lyra stirred. Her eyes blinked open, confused for a moment. Then she looked up at him and whispered, "You're still here." He nodded. "Told you. Not leaving." She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. He passed her another ration bar. She ate it more slowly than the last one, chewing carefully. Her eyes stayed on the crack in the wall that showed the trees beyond. "Bad place," she murmured. "Worse when it's quiet." "Yeah," Riven said. "I feel it too." They packed quickly. Riven did a full sweep of the structure to make sure it hadn't drawn attention in the night. Nothing moved. Not yet. As they stepped out into the clearing, the jungle greeted them with more silence. They walked side by side, Lyra still close to him but a little steadier on her feet. She didn't hold his hand this time, but she kept brushing against his side, like she wasn't sure she trusted herself alone. The ground sloped downward, and soon they were deep among twisted trees. Then, Riven saw it, a shimmer in the air. A faint line, almost invisible, running between two trunks. He stopped. Just in time. A laser tripwire. He gently pulled Lyra back. The wire had been angled precisely at chest height for someone her size. "Trap," he said. She looked at it with wide eyes. "These, not made by forest." He turned to her. "What do you mean?" She stepped carefully to the side and pointed with one finger at the base of the tree. "Tech old. My people used some, but not here. Not in this place." Riven followed her gaze. A buried emitter was hidden in the moss. It bore markings he couldn't read, but it didn't look natural. He scanned the ground. More signs. A pressure plate barely concealed beneath a cluster of leaves. A pit trap, carefully disguised, with glints of metal spike tips just visible at the bottom. This path was meant to be avoided, he muttered. Lyra didn't speak. Her eyes were darker now, distant. They moved more slowly. Each step was deliberate. Riven pointed out traps as they went, bladed logs strung from vines, hidden nooses that would snap a body into the air, even small devices that would have released sonic pulses if triggered. All aimed in one direction. The one they were walking. Someone wanted this path covered in danger. Someone wanted to make sure no one followed it. Or no one returned from it. Riven kept glancing at Lyra. Her eyes darted nervously from tree to tree. "You okay?" She hesitated. Then she whispered, "They didn't want me to come back." He stopped. Turned to her. "Who?" She didn't answer immediately. Her mouth trembled like the words tasted like poison. "My people." Riven blinked. "You mean? They want me to stay gone? Stay lost?" A long silence passed between them. Why? She hugged herself. Don't know. Mama said to run. She stayed behind. I thought she would come after. But she didn't. The pain in her voice was sharp. But under it, guilt. Riven touched her shoulder. Maybe she couldn't. Lyra looked up at him, eyes shimmering. Or maybe she chose not to. No, Riven said. No mother would leave you unless she had to. She wanted to believe him. He could see it. They kept moving. Ahead, they came to a fallen tree, thick with moss. As they stepped over it, Lyra suddenly froze. Her breath caught. Riven turned to follow her gaze. Carved into the trunk, faint and recent, were words in a language he couldn't read. But Lyra could. She whispered the translation. Do not trust her. He frowned. What does that mean? She stepped back. Her hands shook. They think I'm dangerous. Are you? She looked up at him. No, she whispered. But, sometimes I feel something inside. It glows. It hums. Like fire. He knelt beside her. That doesn't make you dangerous. That makes you special. She blinked slowly. Then reached out. And once again, took his hand. They passed through the narrowest part of the jungle yet. The trees grew so close their branches tangled above, forming a canopy that turned daylight to dusk. Then the ground trembled. Just a shudder. Enough to make leaves dance. Riven held Lyra back. He scanned the trees. Branches snapped in the distance. A growl. Low. Deep. Close. Move, he whispered. They turned and ran. Something crashed behind them. Something huge. Trees split apart. Leaves flew. Lyra screamed. Riven grabbed her arm and pulled her ahead. Then the creature burst into view. It stood twice his height. Its body was thick, armored with bark and stone. Four glowing eyes stared down at them. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Riven pushed Lyra behind a log. He turned, raised his sidearm, and fired. One shot. Two. The creature roared. But it didn't fall. It charged. Riven dove aside, rolled, came up holding a jagged stick like a spear. Stay down, he shouted. The beast swung a massive limb. Riven ducked and jabbed the stick into its side. The creature howled and threw him. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding in his shoulder. Still, he stood. Again, he charged. Jumped onto its back. Grabbed a thick vine-like tendon and pulled. The creature thrashed, slamming into trees. Riven held on. Pulled harder. The beast stumbled. Lyra watched, frozen in horror. Riven reached back, grabbed a sharp branch, and plunged it into the back of the creature's neck. With a final roar, it collapsed. Riven rolled off, coughing. His arms trembled. His ribs ached. Blood dripped from his cheek. But he was alive. And so was Lyra. She ran to him, fell to her knees. You came back, she whispered. Of course, he said, wincing. She reached for his face, gently touching the wound. You fought that, for me. He smiled, weak. You're worth fighting for. Tears filled her eyes. Then, for the first time, she hugged him. He held her, gently. It's okay, he whispered. You're okay now. That night, they found shelter inside the hollow of a fallen tree trunk. Riven built a small fire just outside, its light casting warm glows along the bark. Lyra sat beside him, the blanket pulled tight around her. I've never seen anyone fight like that, she said softly. Didn't have a choice. You did, she said. And you chose me. He looked at her. She stared into the fire. Mama once said, if someone fights for you without being asked, that's someone you never forget. Riven smiled. Then I better keep fighting. She leaned into his side. Her head rested against his arm. Her eyes closed. For the first time, she fell asleep without fear. And for the first time, Riven realized he wasn't just rescuing her. She was saving him too. Riven woke to the smell of damp earth and the soft breath of the jungle. Lyra was already awake. She sat cross-legged at the edge of the tree hollow, watching the light shift through the branches. Her fingers were tracing shapes in the soil, silent and slow. He sat up, groaning softly. His muscles ached from the fight. His ribs burned when he breathed too deep. Lyra glanced back at him. Her eyes weren't full of fear today. They were focused. Had a dream, she whispered. About her. Riven nodded, easing himself to sit beside her. Your mother. She nodded. Then turned back to the dirt and began to draw. Her finger etched curves and corners, rough and fast, then she smoothed it out with her palm and began again, slower. Methodical. What are you drawing? Memory. She traced a curved line. A stream. A tall spike. A broken tree. She paused and marked a spiral. A place where the ground glows. Then she added a jagged shape and a line under it. A hill. Wall beneath. Tunnel. Finally, she made a mark at the top. Here. Mama said to run. I ran. I think she stayed behind. Riven stared at it. The sketch was crude, but detailed. A child's memory, clear and full of weight. It wasn't much, but it was more than they had. You remember this well. Lyra didn't look away from the map. She told me to. In case I needed to find her. He let the silence sit for a while. Then he said, let's find her. Her eyes flicked to him. We don't have a map. No scanner. No signal. We have this, he said, nodding at the drawing. And we have you. She stared a moment longer. Then she wiped the map clean with her palm and stood. We go this way. They passed through a dense section of the jungle, overrun with vines and half-swallowed ruins. Stone pillars leaned like drunken giants. Ancient machines rusted where they had fallen. As they walked, Lyra occasionally paused to study her surroundings. She pointed out tiny things Riven never would have seen, patterns carved into stone, scratches left on bark. This used to be our home, she said. Before the council said we were too strange. Too mixed. He didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. The terrain grew steeper. The light dimmed. The jungle changed. Trees leaned closer together, and the air felt heavier. Riven glanced at the scanner on his wrist. Still dead. They came to a crooked stream. The water was thick and dark, but Lyra pointed across. Over there. Next is the glowing hill. They crossed carefully. Riven took her hand again as they climbed up a shallow slope. Roots twisted around them like sleeping snakes. A tree here had grown in a spiral, curling toward the sky. Near its base, the ground pulsed faintly, a soft blue glow in the dirt. We're close, Lyra whispered. Riven crouched, brushing aside a patch of leaves. Underneath, buried cables glinted. Old tech. Damaged. Then he saw the wall. Half covered in moss, part of it collapsed, but still standing. It stretched into the hillside. That's it, Lyra said. She's behind that. I know it. They stepped forward. Click. Riven froze. Under his foot, something shifted. He looked down. A pressure plate, hidden in the leaves. Don't move, Lyra said quickly. She dropped to her knees and began brushing the ground around him. Beside the plate was a patch of dirt where the moss had been pulled back. Just beside it was a small circle of reflective stone. Step here, she said, pointing. Riven moved his foot carefully. When he stepped onto the reflective patch, nothing happened. The trap was avoided. He let out a slow breath. You're amazing. Lyra smiled. Just a little. They reached the wall. Vines hung heavy, but Lyra pushed through them with both hands. Behind them was a metallic doorway, partially open. She hesitated. Then she whispered, Mama. Silence. She stepped forward. Mama, it's me. It's Lyra. I came back. The silence stretched. Then a sound. A soft groan. The vines rustled. A figure emerged, weak and limping. She had the same pale blue skin, but her hair was long and silver white. Her clothes were torn and ragged. Her eyes, dim but focused, widened at the sight of the child. Lyra? Lyra ran into her arms. They collapsed together to the ground. Riven stood still, unsure whether to move. The woman's voice cracked. I thought I lost you. I thought they. Lyra clung to her mother, shaking. I ran. You told me to run. I did. He found me. He didn't leave. Zoraya's eyes turned to Riven. She studied him. Then whispered, a human. He nodded. She was alone. I couldn't walk away. Zoraya pulled something from around her neck, a cracked pendant on a leather cord. It glowed faintly. Take this. So our people never forget who protected us. He took it. It was heavier than it looked. The glow pulsed once, then faded. Zoraya tried to stand but faltered. Her leg was wrapped in rough cloth, soaked with blood. We need to move, Riven said. This place isn't safe. She nodded. There's a tunnel below the wall. It leads to the old passageways. Safer than staying here. He helped her up and supported her weight. Lyra moved close again, gripping his hand. They entered the tunnel together. Inside, the air was cold and stale. The walls were marked with symbols, language Riven didn't know. The lights were long dead, but Lyra pulled a small orb from a pouch on her mother's side. It lit with soft blue light. The passage twisted downward. Zoraya leaned heavily on Riven. Her breath was shallow. But she whispered stories to her daughter. You remember the garden towers? The way the air smelled after it rained? Lyra nodded. Her voice was small. I missed you. Every night. I tried to find you, Zoraya said. But the council sealed the forest. I was trapped. They called you unstable. Too much human blood. Too many unknowns. Riven looked at her. Is that why they left her? Zoraya nodded. She glows when she's afraid. Ancient energy. They didn't understand it. So they feared it. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Old lights blinked faintly. Riven set her down gently. Lyra knelt beside her mother. We should rest here, Riven said. Zoraya looked up. You saved her. He shrugged. She saved me too. They sat together in silence. But Riven knew something was coming. He could feel it. Something had followed them into the dark. The air inside the ancient tunnel system grew colder with each step. Riven lit a second glow stick from his pack, the soft blue light illuminating slick stone and cracked panels etched with symbols he didn't understand. The tunnel sloped downward, deeper into the forgotten bones of the forest's past. Behind him, Lyra held tightly to Zoraya's arm, guiding her slow steps with quiet determination. Zoraya's limp had worsened, and the blood on her bandage was darker now. They had to keep moving. These halls were abandoned long before I was born, Zariah whispered, her voice barely more than breath. They were meant to stay sealed. Then why are they open now? Riven asked, glancing behind them. She looked at him, eyes shining with exhaustion. Because something else opened them. Riven didn't ask what. He already had guesses. They passed the remains of what had once been a sanctuary. Crumbled statues lined the walls, stone figures with wings and strange headdresses, holding orbs of glass. Moss grew from their mouths. Dust coated the floor in thick layers, undisturbed until their feet stirred it. At the far end of the room, a mural stretched across the curved wall, a tree with stars blooming from its branches, and beneath it, children holding hands. Lyra stopped in front of it. "This is where they taught us stories," she said. "Before everything changed." Riven walked beside her, studying the mural. "It looks like something sacred." It was. Zariah leaned heavily on a support beam. "But sacred things are easy to destroy when you're afraid." They didn't rest long. Not because they weren't tired, they were all bone-deep exhausted. But there was a feeling crawling along Riven's spine, an itch in his nerves. They weren't alone down here. He marked each turn with a chalk line on the wall. Every 5 paces, he checked their path. Every 10, he listened. At first, the sounds were distant. Breathing that wasn't theirs. A scrape of metal on stone. Then came the click. Just one. Sharp. Mechanical. Zariah stiffened. "Scavenger," she said. "It's hunting." Riven turned. "What is it?" "Something twisted," she whispered. "Something made from the dead." Lyra grabbed his arm. Her hand shook. Riven drew his knife. His gun had long since run out of charge. The hallway behind them darkened as something stepped into view. It wasn't a beast. It wasn't a drone. It was both. Bones, wires, and scraps of armor melded together, powered by some inner red core that pulsed where a heart might have been. Its face was half a skull, half a mask. Its eyes glowed like twin coals. Blades jutted from its limbs like claws made of ruin. Lyra froze. Zariah whispered something in her language and shoved her behind Riven. The scavenger let out a static hiss and charged. Riven threw his body into its path. His knife scraped along its arm, slicing through a cable. The creature shrieked, spun, and drove its claws into the stone wall, missing him by inches. He grabbed a loose metal pipe from the floor and swung. Sparks flew. The creature staggered, but didn't fall. Lyra screamed. Blue light flared around her. The glow that came when she was afraid. The scavenger turned toward it. "No!" Zariah shouted. The creature lunged. Zariah raised her arm. Energy sparked from her palm. A glyph lit in the air. A wall of shimmering force slammed the creature backward. "Old magic," Riven breathed. "Forbidden," Zariah said. "But useful." She sank to one knee. Riven rushed forward and drove the pipe into the creature's chest. It shrieked and spasmed. Lyra knelt beside her mother. "Mama, are you okay?" "I will be. Keep moving." Riven didn't argue. They fled through the tunnels, the echoes of the scavenger's destruction fading behind them. Deeper and deeper they went. Eventually they emerged into a vast chamber. The ceiling arched high above, lit by faint light shafts filtering through cracks in the rock. At the center of the chamber stood a platform. A lift. Riven approached it. "It still works." Zariah nodded. "It was our way out during the colony collapse. We never got to use it." Riven helped her onto the lift. Lyra clung to his arm. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little longer." He pressed the control panel. With a deep groan, the lift began to rise. As they ascended, Lyra looked up at him. "You stayed," she said softly. "Even when the monster came. Even when the council left me." "I made a promise," he replied. She nodded. "Then I won't leave you either." The lift broke into sunlight. Warmth hit their faces. The jungle was above them again, golden in the afternoon light. But peace was still far away. Because someone waited for them at the top. The sunlight pouring through the canopy was deceptive. Warm, soft, and golden, it gave the illusion of peace. But Riven saw it immediately, a figure standing just beyond the platform, beside the edge of a ravine. A ship rested behind him, partially buried in vines and leaves, its hull scorched and wings folded like broken limbs. The man wore black armor trimmed with brass and silver, sleek but battle-scarred. His face was sharp, inhuman, with golden eyes and a jagged scar running down the side of his jaw. He stood with his hands behind his back, a stance of authority and threat. Zariah tensed. Lyra gripped Riven's arm tightly. "Cruel," Zariah whispered. The man inclined his head. "Zariah. And the prodigal daughter. You should not have returned." Lyra stepped back, fear widening her eyes. Riven stepped in front of her. "Who are you?" he asked. "A guardian of the old blood. The one who should have finished this years ago." Zariah took a breath. "You were part of the tribunal. You swore she would be spared." "Spared, yes. But not saved. You were told what she might become. A child touched by human defiance and ancient energy. Unstable. Dangerous." Lyra flinched. "She's just a child," Riven said, his voice low. "She wants her mother. She wants peace." Cruel sneered. "Peace built on a lie. That girl should not exist. And neither should you, outsider." He drew a blade from his side. It shimmered with a blue-black edge, pulsing like it breathed. Riven stepped forward. "Then you'll have to go through me." Cruel nodded. "So be it." He charged. Riven barely had time to react. The blade hissed as it cut through air. Riven dodged, rolled, grabbed a length of metal debris from the jungle floor and swung. Sparks flew as metal met metal. Lyra screamed. Zariah tried to stand, to shield her daughter with her own body, but her leg gave out. "Run!" Riven shouted. "Find cover." Cruel struck again. Riven parried, but the force of the blow knocked him to the ground. He rolled and came up behind a broken support beam. "You fight well for a species built on emotion," Cruel spat. "Emotion isn't weakness," Riven growled. He charged again, swinging the pipe like a club. He landed a hit. Cruel stumbled. Blood, blue-black and thick, spattered the ground. But Cruel wasn't finished. With a shout, he raised his blade and swung downward. Riven blocked it, but the impact drove him to one knee. "You would risk your life for her? For something you barely know?" Riven gritted his teeth. "I know enough. She's more human than you." Lyra's eyes welled with tears. Cruel roared and raised his blade again. But before he could strike, a soft hum filled the air. The pendant Zariah had given Riven, it glowed. Blue light burst from it, surrounding Riven like a shell. Cruel recoiled. Lyra stepped forward, eyes glowing, her hands raised. "You said I was a mistake. You were wrong. I'm not just human. I'm not just alien. I'm both. And I choose who I become." The air around her shimmered. Her fear was gone. Only resolve remained. She reached out and touched the pendant on Riven's chest. The light expanded. It struck Cruel like a wave. He screamed, his blade evaporating in his hand. He fell backward, collapsing near the broken ship. Silence. Riven fell to his knees, breathing hard. Lyra knelt beside him. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly. "Thanks to you." Zariah limped to them, tears running down her cheeks. "You did it, my light. You found your strength." Lyra hugged her mother tightly. Then turned to Riven. "You never left me. Not once." He touched her shoulder. "Never will." Behind them, the old ship groaned. Zariah looked to it. "It can still fly. I hid it for this day. In case we ever had to leave." Riven helped her to her feet and carried her toward the vessel. Lyra walked beside him. Inside, the ship was battered but functional. Dusty controls. Cracked glass. But the engine responded when Lyra touched the panel. Riven sat Zariah in the co-pilot's seat. He took the pilot chair. Lyra stood behind them, one hand on each of their shoulders. The engines hummed. The ship rose. Below them, the jungle vanished into a sea of green. The old wounds of a forgotten war left behind. In the quiet of the cabin, Zariah looked at Riven. "In our stories," she said, "we once believed in guardians. Beings who stood between light and shadow. I thought they were myths." She placed her hand over his. "Today, I saw one." Riven didn't speak. He only smiled. Lyra curled up beside him, head on his arm. "You shared your food. You saved my life. You brought me to my mother. So now, I protect you." He touched her hair gently. "Deal." As stars opened before them, the human, the child, and the mother left behind the galaxy that tried to bury them. Together. Whole. And free. They flew for hours through the starlit corridors of space, the atmosphere of the ruined world shrinking into memory behind them. Riven piloted in silence, eyes steady on the console, one hand resting lightly near the engine's throttle. Zariah had fallen asleep in the co-pilot's seat, her breathing shallow but peaceful, the strain of her wounds finally softened by rest. Lyra curled against Riven's arm, her breath warm on his sleeve. She hadn't let go of him since the ship had lifted off. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, eyes half-lidded. Riven hesitated. "Away," he said. "Somewhere safe." She nodded, but didn't respond. For a long while, the only sounds were the hum of the engine and the distant pings of old proximity beacons drifting through dead space. Riven switched on the navigation system, searching for an unmarked sector. Somewhere off the charts. Somewhere where war, judgment, and exile hadn't reached. Zariah stirred beside him. "The frontier," she whispered. "There are places the Council abandoned long ago. Terraformers failed, colonies never seeded." Riven nodded. "Places where no one would think to look." "Then go," she said. "Before they change their minds." He didn't need to ask who they were. The ship, though battered, responded to his touch. They curved away from the known routes, diving into the shadows of old nebulae, past remnants of ships long forgotten, debris fields haunted by lost transmissions. Through it all, Lyra stayed close, quiet, alert. "Will they come for us?" she asked. "Maybe," Riven said honestly. She glanced up. "What will you do if they do?" He looked down at her. "Fight." Again. A flicker of a smile touched her lips. "Good." Hours passed. Days, maybe. Time blurred in the quiet of space. Zariah began to recover slowly, though her leg remained bandaged and weak. She spoke more, shared stories from before the fall, tales of the colony when it was vibrant, her work on energy fusion, and the day Lyra was born. She was quiet, even then, Zariah said with a soft laugh. She stared at everything like she could already see more than we could. Riven listened, saying little. He had never known what a family sounded like. Now he did. One night, if you could call it night in the constant dark of space, Riven sat alone at the back of the ship, watching stars blur through the viewport. Lyra approached quietly, curling beside him. "You miss Earth?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not really." "Why not?" He thought a moment. "Because it never felt like home." "Not really." Lyra leaned against him. "Then this is your home now. With us." He didn't answer aloud. He didn't have to. Weeks later, they found it. A planet on the edge of the maps, barely registered. No structures, no beacons. A wide, open world covered in emerald oceans and pale lavender trees. The scans came back clean. Zoraya nodded from the co-pilot seat. "It's enough. We can build." Riven guided the ship down.